Good afternoon.
Hello.
How are you? Jeff in Las Vegas.
Nice to see you.
And how do you say it? Is it Kier-La?
It's pronounced Kayla.
No kidding.
Yeah,
That's so
so it's actually
unique.
pronounced a lot easier than it looks.
I love it. I know a Kayla, but it wasn't spelled like that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. You know what? I'm first of all, I'm really jealous of you and the kind of a hatred because I kept saying, I wish I made this documentary. This is this is like my lifelong ambition of these horror films in one setting. I mean, this is just a work of art. It's just so fantastic. So I just want to praise you at the very beginning.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, 200 films featuring 50 interviews. This is so comprehensive. It was overwhelming for me. It really was. It's like taking a college course in folk horror. It really is. So it's a great reference, a great reference. So how did this come about? Because this isn't just about your movies and chapters. I mean, you cover everything. I mean, this had to be not only a labor of love, but overwhelming to organize.
Yeah, so I mean, originally it started off, it was just going to be about British folk horror, and it had started off being a bonus feature for Blood on Satan's Claw, and it ended up just growing and growing and growing beyond that. But the chapters really helped to break things down according to region, which helps give some individual context to the different films, but also we really tried to stick to sort of big ideas or big themes and then bring the films in as they related to those themes rather than trying to just go film by film by film covering every film, because we felt like then it really could lose its energy really quickly, so we thought it'd be better if we can try to bring as many films in as possible while tying them to one of the film's kind of central ideas.
And how would you define folk horror? What's your definition?
I mean, the simplest definition that people use is, horror films that are more often than not set in a rural environment, dealing with some level of folk customs, practices, beliefs. And, obviously it branches out of that here and there, because sometimes you'll have a film that people consider folk horror that actually is that only tenuously connected to horror. There are still many films that people consider folk horror films that just have this kind of dreamy, eerie feeling that many people wouldn't consider actual horror films. And there are many folk horror films that foreground some of the ideas like the rural environment, but they aren't as specifically focused on any sort of supernatural belief, So there's all these various things. And obviously you could say the strongest cases are for folk horror is when a movie has all of those things. But we did cover many films that maybe have only one or two of these different facets, because it was very much based on what fans of folk horror, and there's a lot of them, they're very vocal, there's Facebook groups and everything, fans and critics and scholars of folk horror. It was a kind of looking at everything that are fit within their parameters for folk horror, and trying to, rather than impose a certain definition on it, to take it from the people themselves. Like, these are what the folk think.
Well, I would think, for me, European history, that's the way I think of folk, because that's what I was raised with, but I'm sure every country every part of the world has their own folk. But I think of witches and paganism and things like that. And your documentary is so comprehensive, it would take hours to go through all of it. So I would think we just start with the beginning with the trilogy of films. Could you explain what that concept is?
Yeah, so what's called the unholy trinity of folk horror refers to the films Witchfinder General, Blood on Satan's Claw, and Wicker Man. And these films were named as such by Jonathan Rigby, who's one of our interviewees, and Mark Gaddis on Mark Gaddis's 2010 BBC series, A History of Horror. So the term folk horror had been used before, and it had been used by Jonathan Rigby himself in one of his books. But it was really the use of it on this show and its application to those three films in particular that kind of spawned what we know as the kind of folk horror explosion after that. That show really popularized the term and really helped to give it definition and started this whole proliferation of films by filmmakers who were trying to deliberately make a folk horror film. Whereas many of the films we would refer to as folk horror, older films, they would not have been called that at the time.
And the very beginning of this documentary, I was ecstatic because no two films have influenced me more than Witchfinder General, which was called The Conqueror Worm, here in America, which I hate that title. And also The Wicker Man. Both I saw. I'm Generation X. So back in the mid 70s on television, I saw those, being 10, 11 years old. So you can imagine the effect that those movies had on me. And not only that, but one of my favorite soundtracks of all time is The Witchfinder General. I mean, nobody knows that film, or when I tell people about that soundtrack, unless it's a specific, group of people that appreciate the genre. And you have Ian Ogilvy interview. I mean, I couldn't believe some of the things you reached out to and got. They're almost like mini little special features for each of these films.
Yeah. Yeah, and Ian Ogilvy was great because he, not only was agreed to be interviewed for the film, but he, he read some of the poems that we had in the film. So we had these classic kind of folk horror poems, and he read them so that we could use the audio in the film for more atmospheric moments and stuff.
Yeah, and definitely Wicker Man, the original. And we won't even discuss the Nicolas Cage one. But man, that is just, I just recently watched that again. I try to watch it like every other year, and it's like watching it for the first time. It is just so incredibly creepy. And also the Hammer films. I grew up watching all the Hammer films when I was a kid. And I just think that has a profound influence on folk horror too.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Hammer film stuff probably fits more in the realm of Gothic, but then you have something like The Witches, written by Nigel Neal, that definitely fits into folk horror. And it's interesting because The Witches has some of the same locations as Blood on Satan's Claw, like some of the same filming locations. Which
I have never seen. I have heard of Blood on Satan's Claw. I'm embarrassed being a film critic and for 25 years and also a film fanatic my whole life. I know the title, but I've never had a chance to see it. And that's another thing I wanted to ask about your documentary, and I was at your website as well. I was feverishly writing down movie titles. So I'm like, what is that movie? Ones that's what I love about this, because I'm discovering all of these in context of folk horror. Are you going to have any kind of like master guide on your website or something that lists all these films that you used inside the documentary?
Well, the films are listed in the credits of the movie.
Right.
So that is one place they're available. And I mean, yeah, we hadn't really thought of publishing a list just online. I imagine, we'll probably end up doing it on Letterboxd or something like that, where people can actually then check off the movies they've seen or add them to their own list. Like it might have a more practical purpose if we did it somewhere like that. But it's definitely something we can consider, because I have been told that a lot, that there's kind of an encyclopedic coverage of films.
And when you mentioned these films in the documentary, there were the clips, so I was, from a director and a producer standpoint, how are clearances and obtaining rights to a lot of these things? Because you have just an encyclopedia of films.
Yeah. Well, all of that is still being dealt with in different places, because different regions are all going to have their own rules. And obviously fair use in one place isn't necessarily going to work in another place. So we're still working out how in the rest of the world that's going to work. So I don't have an answer on that yet.
No, I can imagine that's going to be a challenge. And finally today, tell me about coming to South by Southwest, bringing your documentary.
Well, it's a dream, I mean, it's my first film, and to have my first film get into any festival, let alone a festival as big and prestigious as South by Southwest, is a huge honor, and it was a total surprise. And I'm super excited about it. I also lived in Austin for many years, so I have a lot of ties.
That's why you're weird. Huh?
What's that?
That's why you're weird.
But yeah, it's a festival that is very close to me. Like I used to go to it in person all the time, and so I'm just really happy to be premiering there.
Well, Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched, Kier-La, anytime I can discuss Witchfinder General with someone makes my day. And thank you so much for most intriguing documentaries. I mean, it's something I got to watch 2 or 3 times, because I just have to absorb all these facts, because when I meet people, I want to know everything about these films. So thank you for a job well done. And thank you for the interview today, and good luck at the festival.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.